The next section is the nose, because the nose is very important in cleaning it. There's many hadiths about the nose. So Hammam bin Munabi reported, this is what Abu Hurairah transmitted to us from Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he mentioned another hadith, of which this is one, that the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, when anyone amongst you performs ablution, he must snuff his nostrils with water and then clean them. So this is mandatory. He must clean his nose. So cleaning the nose, sniffing the water in, and blowing it out, this is a part of the wudu. It's a mandatory part of the wudu. It's not something you could just leave out. I don't like doing the water on my nose, so I leave it out. Also, narrated Anas bin Malik Abu Hurairah reported that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, when any one of you awakes from sleep and performs wudu, he must clean his nose 3 times, for the devil, the shaitan, spends the night in the interior of the nose. This is the hadith we've been talking about. Okay? So the Prophet Muhammad said, when any of you wakes up from sleep and performs wudu, he must clean his nose 3 times. So the first time in the morning, you should do it 3 times. Fajr, you should do it for 3 times. You wake up in the middle of the night, you should do it 3 times. Why? He said because the devil spends the night in the interior of the nose, or we say the nasal cavity. Okay? And we talked about that, the nasal cavity, the ear, nose, and throat, all this is connected, right? You go to sleep, you have nothing in your nasal cavity. You wake up in the morning, you got all this phlegm, you got all this stuff, you spit it out. Rasulullah said, clean your nose out, because shaitan resides in your nasal cavity at night. Okay, you wake up, you're all clogged up, whatever, clean your nose out. This is from shaitan. How he does it, Allahu A'lam. How he does it, we don't know, but this is believing the unseen. Then we also know the other hadith that says if you sleep past Fajr, he urinates in your ear. Right? He urinates in your ear. How he does it, Allahu A'lam. But we say, Sami'ana wa ata'ana. We hear, and we obey. We believe in that. We believe in that. We have a hadith from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the Sahabas, they slept past Fajr. And so the Prophet Muhammad told Bilal, get up and make the adhan. And so everybody had slept past Fajr. And so the Prophet Muhammad said, this is from a blessing from Allah, because your body has rights over you. But the expiation of one who doesn't make his salat on time is that when he remembers, he does it. So therefore he said, get up and make the adhan. So once they remember that they were late, you hurry up and do it. Okay, that's with any salat. When you realize that you're late to your salat, because the Prophet Muhammad said, the expiation of the sin of not making your prayer on time is to make it when you remember. So this is the expiation of the sin. So you make it late, you still get the reward, and you expiated of the sin of doing it late. That's how merciful Allah is. Once you remember, you do it, He'll forgive you of not making it on time. I don't know. Why do people say there's some scholars who say if you miss certain prayers you can't make them up? And so she's saying this contradicts the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he says that the expiation of the sin of one not making a prayer on time is that when they remember they make it. So surely the hadith out trumps these scholars.
Unless it was intentionally not done, right?
Allahu Akbar. Yeah, then that's between them and Allah. Only Allah knows the intention. Okay? But even if you still missed it, you wake up and you're like, oh man, I mean, you still, inshallah, you still get the expiation. Okay? Alright. So shaitan, he dwells in the nasal cavity when you sleep. Okay? Now with regards to the heels, okay, very important that you wash the feet and you get every part of your foot, make sure it all gets wet. If you leave anything dry, you have no wudu. And we'll give the dalil. Abdullah bin Amr reported We returned from Mecca to Medina with the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and when we came to some water on the way, some of the people were in a hurry at the time of the afternoon prayer and performed wudu hurriedly. And when we reached them, their heels were dry. No water had touched the heels. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Woe to dry heels because of hellfire. Make your wudu thorough." Right? Woe to dry heels because of the fire. Make your ablution thorough. Make your wudu perfect. Don't slack on it. Right? Your wudu is it's either your success or your failure. Your wudu is leading up to the salah. If you don't have the proper wudu, you don't even have a salat. Right? There was a man who came, and I think it's coming up. And I'll just read this. I was going to read this next. Jabir reported, Umar ibn al-Khattab said that a person performed wudu and left a small part equal to the space of a nail, a fingernail. So he washed his feet, but he left only the size of a fingernail dry on his foot. Just a fingernail. The Prophet ﷺ saw that and said, "Go back and perform wudu well." He then went back, performed wudu well, and offered the prayer. Okay, so there was a man in the time of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and he made wudu, but he left a certain part dry on his ankle, just the size of a fingernail. So Rasulullah ﷺ said, "No, go pray again. You didn't pray." There's another hadith, not this one, where he told the man 3 or 4 times, "Go back and pray. Go back and pray. No, you didn't pray. No, you didn't pray." He said, "Well, how should I pray?" He said, "Well, the first thing is make a perfect wudu. Make a perfect wudu. Wash all your parts perfectly." Okay? So now we're going to wiping over the socks and the turban. Wiping over the socks and the turban, because you can wipe over the turban as well. Hammam reported, Jarir urinated, then performed wudu, and then wiped over his socks. It was said to him, "Do you do like this?" He said, "Yes. I saw Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he urinated, then performed wudu, then wiped over his shoes." Amish said Ibrahim had observed this, that this hadith was a surprise for them, the people, because Jarir had embraced Islam after the revelation of Surah Al-Ma'idah. Surah Al-Ma'idah was one of the last surahs revealed. Okay, so he's saying that this was something that was known and something that was done. One of the last things, that wiping over the shoes or wiping over the socks is both permissible. Okay, wiping over the socks and wiping over the shoes is permissible in Islam. Okay, I'm going to read a couple more hadiths and I'm going to give you the prerequisites of it though. The son of Mughira bin Shu'bah reported, the Messenger of Allah ﷺ went out for relieving himself. Mughira went with him carrying a jug of water. There again, water for istinja. Then he, Rasulullah ﷺ, came back after relieving himself. He poured water over him and he performed wudu and wiped over his socks. And in the narration of Ibn Rum, there is till instead of when. Urwa bin Mughira reported from his father, he, Mughira, helped Rasulullah ﷺ in performing his wudu, and he performed it and wiped over his shoes. He, Mughira, said to him about the washing of the feet after putting them off. But he, Rasulullah ﷺ, said, "I put them, the feet, in when these were clean." I put them, the feet, in when they were clean. So there's a prerequisite of putting on the socks, or wiping over the socks, or wiping over the shoes. The prerequisite is that you clean your feet first without the socks. Okay? Say for instance you made wudu. You didn't have no socks on, you didn't have no shoes on, you made wudu. You washed your feet. Then you put on your socks. Then you put on your shoes. Okay? The next time I come to Salaah, if I haven't taken off my socks, I haven't taken off my shoes, okay? And the Salah comes, but it just so happens that I broke wudu. And we're going to go into what breaks wudu. then I don't have to take my shoes off. I don't have to take my socks off if I want to make wudu. I can make wudu when I get to my feet. I can wipe over my shoes. Okay? Or if I took my shoes off, I can wipe over my socks. Wherever there's a barrier, right, and you put a barrier over it after doing proper wudu, you can wipe over that area. Even if you have a cast on, someone has a cast, you broke your arm, right, you just wipe over the cast. You just wipe over. Okay? So this is the sunnah. The same applies with the turban. Let me get into this hadith though. Urwa bin al-Mughira Sha'aba reported on the authority of his father that he said, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam lagged behind in a journey, and I also lagged behind along with him. After having relieved himself, he said, have you any water with you? I brought to him a jug of water. He washed his palms and face and then tried to get his forearms out. He could not, for the sleeve of the gown was too tight. He therefore brought them out from under the gown, and throwing it over his shoulders, he washed his forearm. He then wiped his forelock and his. So not only did he wipe over his shoes, but he also wiped over the turban. And the prerequisite of wiping over the turban was that he wiped his forelock. And the same rule applies to the turban or even head covering. If you make wudu without no head covering, without no turban, then you put the turban on. When you come back to wudu, you don't have to take the turban off. You wipe underneath the forelock, right? And wipe over the turban. Wet hands, wipe over the turban. Okay, same thing with the shoes. Wipe over the shoes, wipe over the socks. Now, who can tell me the proper way to wipe over the feet, or wipe over the shoes, or wipe over the socks? What's the proper way?
I think like this. I wipe from the top of my foot all the way from the bottom back up behind the ankles.
Does anybody else do it differently? Ali, he said, in regards to wiping over the socks or wiping over the shoes, he said that if this deen was based on analytical deduction, then you would think that you would have to wipe underneath your feet. The bottom. He said, but this deen is not by analytical deduction. We follow Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and Rasulullah said, wipe over the top one time. Okay? So the sunnah is wipe over the top one time. We don't wipe on the bottom. The bottom is not part of the sunnah. And this is stated by Ali Al-Fresnowwy. He said that if this deen was based on analytical deduction or common sense, he said common sense would be you would think that you would wipe on the bottom of the foot, but he said because we follow Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said to wipe over the top, so we wipe over the top. There's a hadith. If the dirt, if it's najis, there's a hadith where the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was making salah in his shoes. Because the sunnah is you can pray in your shoes. There's nothing wrong with praying in your shoes. To the contrary, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to pray in your shoes. Pray in your shoes. We'll get into that in a minute. But the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the masjids were made out of dirt. There was no carpets. There was no beautiful carpet. There was no carpet. It was the dirt, and there was even one time when the roof had a hole in it, and there was rain, and the Prophet Muhammad had mud on his face from prostrating into the dirt. So he had mud on his face. There was nothing there. Also, he prayed in his shoes. I'll give you two examples. One was the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the other one was Uthman bin Affan. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was making salat, and in the middle of the salat, he took off his shoes. So the Sahabas that were praying behind him, they took off their shoes too. So when he finished, he said, man, why y'all take off your shoes? He said, we saw you take your shoes off, so we took our shoes off. He said, no. He said, the only reason why I took my shoes off in the salat, because the angel Jibreel alayhi salam told me that I had something najis. I had something dirty or nasty on my shoes. So he told me to take them off. He said, but pray in your shoes. Pray in your shoes unless you see najis. So there's nothing wrong with praying in your shoes. To the contrary, sometimes you should pray in your shoes to show that it's the sunnah, because if you think that it's haram or something wrong with praying in your shoes, then that's a bid'ah. Some of the customs that we have as far as the rugs and stuff like that, get this from the Christians and the Jews or the Persians. We get this from them. Right? We get a lot of these things from the non-Muslims. Again, like I said, in the time of the Prophet Muhammad, the masjid was dirt. It was dirt. And another hadith, if we read in the Muwatta bi Imam Malik, it talks about Uthman bin Ali. And this is talking about when he lined up the prayers, foot to foot, shoulder to shoulder. Right? It said before he started, he would walk through the ranks to make sure everybody was foot to foot, shoulder to shoulder. And he said that before he started, he would move the pebbles with his shoes before he made Salaah. So he had sandals on. He had shoes on. So he would move the pebbles out the way.
But you're not supposed to do that, are you?
One time. One time. He said if there's something, if the Rasulullah said if there's something that you want to move out the way, he said only wipe one time. Only one time. Don't just sit there. He said just wipe one time. There's a hadith Rasulullah said you can put the shoes in between your feet. And if there's no one on the left side, put them on the left side. But if someone's on the left or right, put them in between them. Okay? So, when we know the sunnah, there's many things, we're not limited. This deen is easy. Oh, brother, take your shoes off. No. I don't have to, but I'll respect you because I'll respect your carpet. But really, we're not. The thing is, let's talk about making salat in the open area. If you're out in the public, you can use your shoes. You ain't got to take your shoes off. Even if you're in your house, you got some house shoes that you walk around with, and you did it for the house. You can pray in those too. Slippers, okay, same thing. Okay, but the main thing is that you can pray in your shoes, or you don't have to pray in your shoes. Both is correct. Okay, but don't. I wouldn't advise you to try to walk up in the mosque with your shoes on. I know somebody that's done that before, just to try to prove something. You know, but this is the reality. You know, we can't stop the sunnah though. You know, we can't make that which is halal. We can't make it haram. We have conformed to certain norms. But is that the sunnah? No. What is the sunnah? We gotta go back. Oh, Rasulullah, he prayed in the shoes. Oh, they prayed on the dirt. Oh, they prostrated in the mud. They prayed with their sandals on. They took their shoes off in the middle of the prayer. So these are the sunnah. Knowledge is power. The more knowledge you have about this deen, then the more you know what you can do and what you can't do. Right? Knowledge is power. The more knowledge you have, can't nobody tell you nothing. Can't nobody lie to you. Can't nobody give you false information. So with the knowledge, you have the proper knowledge, you have different options. Okay, well, I've been doing my salah, I've been making wudu 3 times each. Well, maybe today I only do it 1 time.
So the hadith you said about the shoes or Uthman?
This was in the Muwatta bi Imam Malik. It said that before he would start the prayers, he would make everybody a stole. He would tell everybody foot to foot, shoulder to shoulder. And he said in one instance, they said you could see Uthman kicking the pebbles. Kicking the pebbles out the way before the salah in the sandwich. This is in the Muwatta.
What does style mean?
A stall means establish the ranks. A stall. Straighten the ranks. A stall. Straighten them up. Okay. And there's inshallah, when we get into get more next week, maybe inshallah, I have it's like 6 or 7 pages of 4 pages of dalil of standing foot to foot, shoulder to shoulder. So we can nip this out. Get this out the way. Nip this in the bud. You know, as far as are we supposed to stand foot to foot, shoulder to shoulder? How do we do it? Is this a command from Allah, the Prophet Muhammad, or is it not?